Oh boy, I cannot express how long I have been waiting for this game, and let me say, the beta did not disappoint. In fact, I've been so hyped about this game that I posted this 4 days before I got the sponsorship offer. Oh, yeah, right, this video is in fact sponsored by Silver Palace. And because sponsored reviews are always seen with a grain of salt, instead of reviewing the game here, it is a CBT1 after all, I will instead simply talk about my experience with the CBT1, which also means all of this is my personal opinion and you can disagree, and that is okay. However, 2 disclaimers ahead. First, I will not deep dive into the story, instead I would much rather keep this game as spoiler-free as possible and only provide a rough overview of the setting and tone. Secondly, I am contractually obligated to tell you this is a CBT1 after all, and this version does not represent the final quality of the game. But first, what even is Silver Palace? Silver Palace is a gothic 19th century European dark fantasy open world action RPG developed using Unreal Engine 5, featuring stylized rendering with high contrast, blending realism and Victorian-inspired arts. The player assumes the role of the detective, investigating crime scenes, gathering clues, and solving cases. Each main story chapter features a standalone mystery inspired by classic fairy tales, such as our beautiful Cinderella here. I do not remember the stepped upon part in the original fairy tale though, but I guess that is why it's called inspired by. Silver Palace is set in Silvernia, an industrialized metropolis built on the power of Silverium during the 3rd year of Queen Felinia's reign. The story features a primarily suspenseful tone with subtle humor, integrating both action sequences and detective puzzle-solving segments. While sometimes some voice lines have been either entirely missing for me or some dialogue cut off slightly early during the main story, I won't take this too much of a negative for now, as it is the first CBT, and frankly, for being the very first CBT, this game is much more polished than it could be. And as a short spoiler warning here, I will show the opening cutscene and tutorial for the next 30-ish seconds to 1 minute. Skip to the timestamp on screen right now if you don't want to see this. Silver Palace tutorial was, well, not really a tutorial. In fact, I would argue it was quite awful as a tutorial. They throw you hands-on into a full-fledged boss fight with multiple phases and mechanics, and they do not hold your hand. You have some instructions on the left to guide you, but reading them while trying not to die is certainly a choice. Frankly, I am not actually sure if you can actually fail the combat tutorial and what happens if you do. Additionally, it also felt pretty disconnected to the overall main story afterwards, and I suppose, but this is just a guess from my side, it is a placeholder for now. Personally, I really liked how the game is very short and concise with their tutorials, and they are not holding your hands. Whatever they decide to do in the end, I do hope that they keep this part at least. I hate hand-holding, and this game does it just right. On the other hand, they also do not explain a lot of things, and some information to me is simply missing. A good example here being the stat screen. I really would like some more information on what Break Exploit and Resonance Burst exactly do and how they work. What is the difference between resonance efficiency and build-up efficiency? Just some examples here. But back to the overworld. The graphics are simply just very nice and visually pleasing, and I also do want to highlight this massive splatter of blood a few minutes into the game. I really hope that they will keep this in the final game when it releases and it does not turn into a black puddle. When exploring the overworld, we can open chests, solve puzzles, and of course also ride our magical horse, or whatever this is supposed to be. I do want to mention that I found navigating the mount sometimes extremely difficult, and it took me quite a bit of time to get used to it. I think the controls here can be a bit improved to feel slightly more intuitive and responsive. I personally also would really like some skins for the mount when the game releases, or maybe just different mounts in general. I do want to shortly talk about the inspect or analyze system as well. 99% of the objects in this game cannot be inspected, and that makes me extremely sad. I want to know what those books are about, and when I can expect them, it tells me somewhat nothing. The same can also be said for the honestly insane amount of NPCs in this game. We can analyze and inspect all of them. And all of them have some generic texts pulled from a small pool of words, and doing so does quite literally nothing. There is no benefit whatsoever in doing so, and I think this is fully wasted potential. Instead of the minimap urgently blinking red and quite literally pointing me to the werewolf while playing sound effects to make sure I do not miss them, why not tell me there is a werewolf somewhere around and I have to gather clues by analyzing the NPCs or simply, well, objects in the area? Let me analyze the flowers, which then tells me there is blood on them. Let me analyze a random NPC, which shows me a scent of blood, which then slowly leads me to the werewolf, rather than me just simply holding right click to whatever the arrow points to. I really love this detective feature, but I think as of right now, it is very wasted potential and honestly pretty pointless. Speaking of werewolves already, let's talk a bit about the game's combat. Each character features 4 active skills, 1 passive, and a node system called methods. Each active skill has a maximum level of 3 and is gradually unlocked through this method system. Some nodes also simply provide stats. To level these nodes, we require various materials, with the later nodes requiring this specific material, which we can obtain from defeating daily bosses. Actually, I'm pretty sure this boss's rewards, or how often we can defeat them, will be adjusted for the live version, as we can defeat it currently at least once a day, and it will already drop 12 of these materials at the very first difficulty. We need 12 to max out a single character. There is absolutely no way that they will let us max out one character every single day when the game goes live. The actual combat then features a real-time multi-character system with your team consisting up to 4 playable characters. Hitting and defeating enemies creates silver drip, which then slowly fill up the reactor, which is this thing at the bottom, and whenever it is filled up, it empties to fill one of these 3 segments. When we switch characters, if at least one of these segments is filled, one segment will be consumed and the incoming character will use their entry skill called ambush skill. As of right now, while weapons exist, there is no standard equipment in the game. Instead, each character can equip so-called catalysts, and when a character uses their ambush skill, the catalyst's effect will activate. These can range from a simple damage boosts to some much more interesting effects, such as the equipping character not being able to build up attribute anomaly or stun values, but gaining a huge damage boost instead. The entire team shares also a power limit. Equipping 1, 2, 3 catalysts to the same character will increase its power cost by 1, 2, 4 units respectively, which means if we were to equip 3 catalysts on the main character, it would require 7 power. This power level increases based on your world level, and honestly, I really like the system so far, as it offers quite a lot of flexibility, while also being a zero grind game, as there are no main or substats to acquire. Speaking of attribute anomaly already, this game also features a resonance system, with a unique resonance effect being activated based on the attributes of the characters in the team. Attacks performed by characters of the same attribute will raise the resonance level of said element, and when the resonance level reaches level 5, depending on the element, a different effect will happen. If the team features 3 characters of a different attributes, in addition, all characters will then also gain a final damage boost. Of course, the combat also features some more basic kind of mechanics, such as basic attacks, charge attacks, dodging, parrying, skills ultimates, and also an execution mechanic, as well as weapon switching, and while those are well done, the focus really lies on the ambush skills and catalyst and reactor systems. As this is the CBT1, while I would like to dive deeper into those, as pretty much everything is subject to change, I will refrain from doing so, for this beta at least. However, I do want to provide my personal notes on these in terms of what is good and what can be improved upon. First up, the parries feel extremely satisfying, and the combat overall feels also very smooth and fluent. There are some inconsistencies in terms of what is swap cancelable and what isn't, but it is the first beta and I really just don't wanna min-max a beta, so I will not go deeper on this. However, the part that definitely needs work, and by that I mean honestly a lot of work, is the combat camera. It honestly feels awful. It is too close to the character, so half of the time either the boss is off screen or half of the enemy horde isn't visible. The target lock-on also doesn't move the camera nicely, so if the boss jumps into the air, well, you likely won't see them anymore. This is also a problem, since that means a lot of the golden parry indicators just happen off screen and you don't get to see them. Also, please make them bigger. The parry indicators are also missing some SFX, which could help this tremendously, honestly. Lastly, whenever combat ended, the game froze for me for a few seconds, but yeah, might just be a me problem. However, if the camera is adjusted and the post-combat freeze fixed, I think the combat feels really polished and honestly well done. If at all, one can argue that basic attacks might still feel slightly too floaty, but it didn't really bother me that much. But maybe it is still worth noting for some of you. As of the CBT, Silver Palace also features 2 available endgame modes. Deep Cognito, which is effectively your standard Gacha Abyss gameplay, just very easy, and the case simulation, which is the roguelike gameplay. While both of these game modes do serve their purpose and they do so well, I really wish there would be a bit more uniqueness to them, as they do not stand out to me among the other endgame modes from a lot of other 3D action RPG gacha games. For the roguelike, I wish they would incorporate the detective gameplay more. Rather than me having fight enemies over and over and over again, why not have the detective solve puzzles and gather clues, which then might or might not lead up to various enemies and a final boss at the end, depending on your choices during the run. This is a detective game after all, right? And the Abyss gameplay really is just one boss or a horde of mobs on a timer and did not feel special to me either. But I feel like both of these game modes are not the final version and heavily work in progress, and more so them providing a way to test our combat skills currently versus higher difficulty enemies. The CBT honestly was very short, which also means I will treat this much more of a tech and gameplay demo rather than an actual beta test. However, I personally had a fantastic experience with it. The game ran at a constant 50 to 60 FPS at minimum at the highest graphic settings. I encountered close to no bugs whatsoever, and generally this CBT felt extremely polished for a very first beta, but also very short. So rather than getting hung up on hypotheticals on what may or may not change in the next one, I would like to end the video with my thoughts and first impressions on the CBT as a whole. The music was good but not outstanding or super memorable. The art style for the UI, overworld and NPC are superb and one of the best I've seen personally, and the combat has a lot of potential, with me personally having 1 or 2 gripes primarily with the camera as of right now. The endgame modes feel a bit generic and honestly placeholderish for now, so I won't judge it further. The story was told in a concise and effective manner without much yapping and kept me engaged throughout. The gameplay loop between dialogue, exploration, combat and detective gameplay was not only well thought out and executed, but also engaging. The overworld movement on the mount felt a little bit stiff at times, but honestly also nothing breaking. Lastly, I think the game would profit from a jump button, and I really hope more objects were interactable and analyzing NPCs would actually do something. With that said, we are at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment on your thoughts on the Silver Palace CBT1, and if you haven't yet, join the Discord. And as always, I appreciate all of you and wish you a great day. Peace!